The sky over Eldoria was restless that night. Clouds rolled beneath the floating kingdom like dark tides, hiding the endless drop below. Haytham stood at the edge of the royal citadel courtyard, a circle of guards closing around him. Spears lowered, shields steady, eyes wary of the glow in his own. Jigar eyes, sharp, gold in the dark, not quite human. His arms were heavy, the last of the combat potion burning out of his blood. His muscles ached, his breath came hard, but his grip on the sword didn't falter. He had killed his brothers tonight, the last of the Jigars, men who had bled and trained beside him. He had done it because the king ordered the program erased, and now the king wanted him gone too. The captain's voice cut through the night. Haytham of the Jigars, lay down your weapon. By the crown's order, you are to be executed for treason. Treason. The word stung more than the blade wounds. Across his arms. He had obeyed every command, swallowed every potion, lived through torture that broke others. And this was his reward, to be branded a traitor and slaughtered like the rest. The ring of steel closed tighter. They knew he could still kill half of them before falling, even drained. Fear showed in their eyes. Haytham looked past them, to the spires, to the bridges of light strung across the night sky. The kingdom he had killed for, the kingdom that wanted him erased. He could fight. He could carve a path through them, vanish into the streets. But there was nothing left worth running for. The captain shouted again, "Drop it, Jigar, last chance." Haytham didn't answer. He stepped back, boots scraping stone. The guards, tensed, ready for the strike. Instead, Haytham turned and threw himself off the edge. Gasps rang out behind him, swallowed instantly by the wind. The torches above shrank into distant stars. The kingdom vanished into the night sky as the storm took him, dragging him into the endless dark. Everyone in Eldoria knew no man survived the fall. The guards would report he was gone. The king would sleep easy, and the Jigar program would be marked as finished. But Haytham lived, broken, half dead, but alive on the wild earth below. And from that night on, survival became his curse. For years he kept his head down, a drifter, a hired hand, until he found a quiet farm, an old man, and a boy who treated him like family. For the first time since the fall, Haytham thought he had found peace. But peace doesn't last. Not for men, like him. For years the farm kept him quiet. Haytham worked the fields by day, fixed tools by night, and learned to live without a blade in his hand. The old man, Corin, gave him shelter without questions. His grandson, Kale, gave him something harder to ignore. Trust. The boy followed him everywhere, asking about the world beyond the hills, about soldiers and battles, about the scars that cut across his arms. Haytham never gave him the full truth. Some stories weren't meant to be told, but in Kale's laughter, in the way Corin cursed at stubborn plows then winked a moment later, Haytham found something that almost felt like home. Almost. One evening, storms gathered in the distance. Haytham rode out to trade grain at the village, leaving Kale behind to tend the animals. By the time he returned, the night was too quiet. The farmhouse door hung from its hinges. Smoke curled from the rafters. Haytham dropped the sack of grain and ran inside. Furniture smashed, blood spattered across the walls. Corin lay on the floor, breathing but broken, ribs crushed, head bleeding. "Kyle," Haytham said, voice low, urgent. "Where's the boy?" Corin's hand shook as he tried to point. His voice rasped. "They took him. Riders. Masks." He coughed blood. Jigar said, "They'll make him one." The words cut deeper than any blade. Haytham pressed a cloth against the wound. But he knew the old man wouldn't last the night. Corin grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Bring him back," he whispered. "He's all I had left. Don't let them turn him." The grip slackened. Corin's hand fell away. Haytham stayed there a long moment, jaw tight, the firelight flickering across his face. His chest felt heavy, the same weight he carried the night he fell from Eldoria. He had tried to bury that part of himself, but the world had dragged him back. He rose, strapped on the old sword he had hidden beneath the floorboards, and left the farmhouse without looking back. Tracks in the mud showed where the raiders had ridden north, toward the forests at the kingdom's edge. Fast, but not untraceable. Hatham moved with purpose, every step steady, his senses sharper than most men's even without potion. He could smell the smoke of their torches on the wind, hear the faint echo of hooves long gone. By dawn, he found the first sign of them. A farmer's wagon overturned, blood staining the road, bodies stripped and left for carrion. Not common, bandits, too clean, too deliberate. Hatham crouched by the bodies, throats cut, fast and precise. Military training. He knew that style. He had killed with that style. Jaegers. Not the ones he had slain years ago. These were new. Someone had restarted the program. Someone was building an army, and Kale was in their hands. Hatham pressed a hand against the dirt, grounding himself. He could almost hear Corin's voice, rough but steady. Bring him back. He rose and walked on, following the trail into the trees. The forest swallowed the light as Hatham pushed deeper. Branches tangled above him, muting the sky, and the ground softened under his boots. The trail was clear, bootprints too disciplined to belong to bandits. A wagon dragged heavy with chains. They weren't hiding their path. They didn't fear pursuit. By nightfall, he caught sight of their camp. Fires burned in a clearing, shadows moving between them. Men armored in dark leather stood watch. Not careless, but not tense either. They carried themselves like soldiers, and their eyes, Hatham saw it even from the trees, carried that faint, unnatural glow. New Jaegers. His hand tightened on his sword. His chest burned at the sight. They were supposed to be gone, buried with the ones he had slain. But someone had revived the program. Someone had found the potions, the training methods, the madness it took to make them. He scanned the camp. Near one of the wagons, Kale sat bound in a cage, pale but alive. The boy's eyes darted at every noise, but he stayed silent. Smart. Hatham edged closer, silent as a predator. He counted a dozen guards, maybe more. His body was strong, but not what it had once been. Even in his prime, charging this camp head-on would have been suicide. From the largest tent, a figure stepped out. Tall, masked, draped in black and steel. His mask was carved smooth, no face, only slits for eyes that gleamed faintly in the firelight. The guards straightened at his presence, not out of fear but out of drilled discipline. One of them bowed his head. "Marshal," the man's voice carried low but sharp. "The boy's blood is clean. He will take to the trials. By the week's end, he will be ours. The Shade Marshal." Hatham had heard the name whispered in villages, tied to disappearances and burned-out homesteads. A ghost story turned commander. No one had proof he existed, until now. Hatham's jaw tightened. Kale was no recruit. He was a boy. He would not be broken, not for this cursed program. But Hatham didn't move. Not yet. Rushing now would doom Kale before he could reach him. He forced himself to breathe slow, to wait, to plan. The guards rotated. Shifts. The fires burned lower. Midnight stretched over the camp. That's when Hatham slipped closer, low to the ground, every movement silent. He reached the wagon where Kale was caged. The boy's eyes widened when he saw him, but Hatham raised a finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered. "I'll get you out." He pulled at the lock, solid iron, too thick to break without noise. He cursed under his breath. A twig snapped behind him. Hatham spun, blade half-drawn. A Jaeger guard stared back at him, eyes glowing faintly, hand already reaching for the horn at his belt. The alarm blared across the camp, sharp and piercing. Shadows rushed to arms, torches flared, the whole clearing waking at once. From across the firelight, the Shade Marshal's masked head turned, their eyes locked, predator to predator. The horn's cry cut through the night like steel through cloth. Torches flared, boots thundered, and the camp came alive in an instant. Hatham had no choice now. He yanked the sword free and drove it into the first guard's chest before the man could cry out. The body dropped hard, but the noise was already drowned by shouts from every direction. "Over here! At the cages!" Kale's small hands clutched the bars. "Hatham! Stay down!" Hatham barked, pulling his blade free. 3 Jaegers rushed him at once, faster and sharper than common soldiers, but Hatham was no common man. His instincts took over, a sidestep, steel flashing as one throat opened, a boot snapping another's knee. He ducked the third's blade and drove, his shoulder into the man's chest, toppling him into the fire. Sparks burst into the night. The boy's cage loomed close, but there were too many between him and freedom. Every second, more soldiers poured from the tents. Haytham knew the math. One man against a regiment. Even a Jeeger couldn't win this fight, but he didn't need to win. He just needed Kale alive. He grabbed a fallen spear, jammed it between the cage and the wagon bed. With a grunt, he levered hard. Wood groaned, iron bent. Then the cage door cracked open. "Run!" Haytham snapped. "Into the trees!" Kyle hesitated only a second, then slipped out and bolted, vanishing into the dark. Relief flared in Haytham's chest. Brief. Fleeting. A shadow loomed. The Shade Marshal stood at the far edge of the firelight, silent, still. He didn't give orders, didn't need to. His presence alone was command enough. The Jeegers closed in again. Too many. Haytham fought, blade flashing, but the potion's gift was long gone. His strikes slowed. His arms burned. A cut split across his ribs, another across his thigh. He pushed on, but the circle was closing. Then a torch hit the wagon behind him. Flames leapt high, smoke choking the clearing. The Jeegers faltered a moment. Enough for Haytham to dive into the firelight, roll beneath a spear thrust, and break through the line. He ran. Branches whipped his face, the forest swallowing him whole. Shouts chased him, but the night was on his side. Few men could match his pace in the dark, even now. He didn't stop until his lungs burned raw. Finally, he dropped behind a fallen log, chest heaving, blood running hot down his leg. He wiped sweat from his brow, eyes scanning the shadows. "Kale!" The boy was nowhere. Haytham slammed a fist into the earth, fury boiling through the pain. He had freed him. The boy should have escaped into the trees. But the Marshal's men would be hunting too. Kyle was alone, and the Shade Marshal would not let such prey slip far. Haytham forced himself upright, every muscle protesting. He had lost Kyle once tonight. He would not lose him again. Somewhere behind him, the horn sounded a second time. Deeper, longer, not alarm, command. The Marshal's voice carried with it, sharp and cold across the distance. Find the boy, kill the man. The hunt had begun. The forest was alive with pursuit. Horn calls echoed through the trees, each one answered by the thud of boots and the rustle of armored men spreading out like wolves. Haytham moved low and fast, every sense sharp. His wounds burned, slowing him, but he knew how to lose a trail. He veered through streams, scrambled over roots, circled back across his own path. Still, the Jeegers pressed close. They were trained for this. The boy mattered more. Kale had fled, into the dark, but fear made people loud. One wrong step, one snapped branch, and the Marshal's men would be on him. Haytham kept his ears open, tuning out the hunt behind him, listening only for what the forest wanted to give. At last he caught it, a ragged breath, too quick, too shallow. To his right, he found Kale huddled beneath a thicket, mud streaked across his face, eyes wide with terror. "Quiet," Haytham whispered, crouching low. "They're close." Boy swallowed hard. "I thought you—" "No time." Haytham grabbed his hand, pulled him up. "Stay at my side, keep low, don't speak unless I tell you." Kale nodded, lips pressed tight. Together they slipped deeper into the woods, but the horns kept closing. A pack, circling prey. Haytham's mind raced. He could fight off a few, but with Kale in tow, he wouldn't last long. They reached a ridge, where the trees thinned. From here, Haytham could see torchlight moving like fireflies below. Squads spreading wider, driving them upward. And then, through the gaps in the branches, he saw him. The Shade Marshal. Standing on the forest floor, still as stone, watching the hunt play out from below. He didn't move, didn't shout. He only lifted a hand, and the Jeegers shifted like a single body. Precision, control, discipline. This wasn't banditry. This was an army. Haytham pulled Kale down behind a boulder, keeping his voice low. "Listen to me. They'll search the ridge. When they do, I'll draw them away. You run downhill, Stay in the stream until you can't hear them anymore. Don't stop. Don't look back. Kale shook his head hard. No, I'm not leaving you. This isn't a choice, Hatham said, harsher than he meant to. You do what I say, or we both die here. Kale's jaw trembled, but he nodded. Branches snapped below. They were coming. Hatham closed his eyes a moment, steadying himself. He had been here before, surrounded, outnumbered, carrying the weight of men who trusted him. Last time he obeyed the king's order, slaughtered his own brothers, and it bought him nothing. This time he had no order but his own. Protect the boy. He rose from cover and moved fast, sword flashing. The first Jeeger never saw him coming, a clean strike across the neck. Hatham shoved the body down the slope, then bellowed loud enough for the others to hear. Over here! Torches swung his way, boots pounded. He turned once toward Kyle, who was frozen, eyes wide. Go! Hatham roared. The boy bolted downslope, just as the pack closed in. Steel clashed. Hatham's blade carved, blocked, and struck again. He fought like he had nothing to lose, each strike costing him blood and strength. A cut tore across his shoulder, another across his ribs, but he pressed forward, forcing the enemy back step by step. Then a shadow fell across him. The Marshal. Up close, he was taller than Hatham remembered. Mask gleaming, cloak shifting in the torchlight. He didn't draw a weapon at first. He simply watched Hatham cut down another guard, then another, as though testing him. Finally, he raised a blade of his own. Curved, blackened steel, humming faintly as though alive. Their swords met with a clang that shook Hatham's bones. The Marshal's strength was monstrous, driving him back in a single blow. Hatham barely kept his feet, every muscle straining. He struck again, and again, the Marshal forced him off balance, each swing deliberate, precise, merciless. Hatham's arms burned. His lungs begged for air. One more clash, and the Marshal slammed a boot into his chest, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The Jeegers closed in around him. The Marshal lowered his blade, mask tilting slightly. Not tonight, he said, his voice muffled but cold. Let him crawl. And just like that, they pulled back. The horns sounded again, this time a retreat. Torches drifted away through the trees, leaving Hatham broken in the dirt. Why had the Marshal spared him? Hatham dragged himself upright, blood soaking his clothes. Somewhere in the forest, Kale was running, alone. The boy might have escaped, or he might already be in their hands. Hatham staggered forward, one thought burning hotter than the pain. The Shade Marshal knew him. Dawn broke pale and cold. Hatham dragged himself out of the trees, every step sending fire through his ribs. His sword arm hung useless, his clothes stiff with blood. The Marshal had spared him, but not out of mercy. That choice burned worse than the wounds. The boy was gone. He had followed the trail until it vanished into stone ground and ash. North, always north. The Jeegers had taken Kale, and Hatham had nothing left but that truth. By midday, his body gave out. He collapsed against the blackened shell of an old watchtower, half fallen into ruin. Its stones were scorched, the roof gone, but it was shelter. He slid down the wall and closed his eyes, letting the silence close in. Sleep pulled him back into the pit. Not the battlefield, the training yard, where boys were broken and reforged into killers. The commander's voice cracked like a whip. Again, faster, harder. The king's enemies do not tire, neither will you. Recruits struck until their arms failed. Some collapsed, some never rose again. The air stank of sweat and iron. Beside him stood Valen, sharp-eyed, his strikes cruel and precise. His mouth curled as he leaned close, voice cutting through the noise. When they choose the best, it'll be me, you'll see. But the words, bent and warped, drowned beneath a new sound, the rasp of steel leaving a scabbard. Hatham blinked. The figure standing behind Valen wasn't the commander. It was himself. Older, harder. Eyes like a predator's, glowing faint in the dark. The blade slid through Valen's back. Valen's mouth opened in shock, but no sound came. Blood ran down the straw dummy he'd been striking, pooling into the dirt. Hatham stumbled back, heart hammering. Around him the yard was gone. The recruits lay scattered as corpses, their bodies twisted, their skulls grinning white through the blood-soaked mud. And the other Hatham, the nightmare version, stood among the bones. His eyes fixed only on him. Step by step, he came closer, blade dripping red. His hand stretched out, reaching not to strike, but to seize. The young Hatham tried to move, tried to breathe, but the air had turned to stone. The nightmare lunged. He woke with a start, breath tearing from his lungs. The ruins around him were quiet. His wounds were sealed, the pain gone as though the dream itself had burned it out of him. Whatever haunted his sleep, it had left his body whole. Hatham rose, steady now, and fixed his eyes north. The boy was waiting. Hatham left the ruins behind at dawn. His steps were sure again, his breath steady, though the memory of the dream clung like smoke. He shoved it down. The boy mattered more than ghosts. The trail led north through barren hills, where the wind keened over stones and nothing lived but crows. By dusk, the land dipped, and the fortress rose from the valley floor. A relic of the old wars. Its walls were jagged with age, yet torches burned bright along its ramparts. New timber braced the gates, iron spikes lined the ditch, and black banners snapped in the wind. Hatham crouched among the rocks and watched. Patrols moved with clockwork rhythm, too disciplined for common raiders, too silent for conscripts. He knew their kind, Jeegers, though younger, rawer. They carried themselves with the same predatory ease he once bore. As night fell, the gates opened. A line of wagons rattled inside. Hatham's jaw tightened. He glimpsed small hands clutching the bars of cages. Children. Kale could be among them. He moved under cover of dark, skirting the wall until he found a fallen section of stone. Time had broken it, leaving a gap wide enough for a man to slip through. He waited until the torches swung away, then slid inside. The stench hit him first. Smoke, blood, and the bitter tang of alchemy. The courtyard was alive with hammer strikes, sparks flying as blacksmiths shaped iron. But not weapons of war. Restraints, masks, cages. He pressed himself against the shadows, slipping between buildings until voices carried to him. In the central yard, the children were herded in lines. Hooded figures moved among them, pressing cups of black liquid into trembling hands. One boy refused. A gaunt Jeeger struck him down with the butt of his spear, then forced the draft between his teeth. The boy writhed, choking, his small frame convulsing. His eyes glowed faintly for a moment before his body went still. The hooded figure dragged him aside like broken cargo. Hatham's stomach twisted. He knew that drink. The same poison that had remade him and ruined the rest. The Shade Marshal was not simply training children. He was remaking them, the way the commander once did. A bell rang. The recruits stiffened to attention. And then he appeared. The marshal stepped from the shadows of the hall, masked and armored, his cloak trailing. Behind him, every Jeeger bowed their head. The children shrank back in terror. He walked the line, silent, measuring each captive. His gaze lingered on one of the cages. Hatham's heart seized. A boy inside. Kale. Bruised, bloodied, but alive. Hatham's fingers closed tight around his blade. The marshal stood across the yard, masked and silent. Kale locked in a cage. Not 10 paces from him, but rushing now meant death. Not just his, but the boy's. So Hatham sank back into the shadows. His body moved on instinct, a hunter's rhythm. Slow, silent, certain. The first guard never saw him. A quick hand over the mouth, a twist of steel under the ribs, and the body was lowered into the dark. One by one, he worked through the outer yard. A sentry by the gate, cut throat to spine. A patrolman, dragged into the black and left to bleed, in silence. Most of them weren't Jeegers, just soldiers pressed into service. Against Hatham's speed, they never stood a chance. Every kill carried him closer to the boy. Through the forge, past the cages, deeper into the fortress. He moved like smoke, leaving nothing but cooling corpses in his wake. Yet the closer he drew, the tighter the noose became. The marshal had vanished back into the inner halls, his Jeegers spreading wide, their eyes glowing faint in the dark. Predators, just like him. Hatham pressed on, Every nerve sharpened, every breath measured. He would reach Kyle. He would tear through anyone who stood in his way. The first clash came in the armory hall. Two Jeegers, armored light, blades drawn, patrolling in silence. They moved with the same economy of motion Hatham once learned. Every step calculated, no wasted breath. He waited until they split, then struck. His knife slid clean under the first man's jaw, catching before a sound escaped. The second turned sharp at the thud, eyes flashing yellow in the torchlight. Their blades met with a ringing crack, strength against strength, speed against speed. The recruit was fast, too fast. He pressed Hatham hard, driving him back across the stone floor. But he overreached, eager for the kill, and Hatham slammed a boot into his knee. Bones snapped, and as the man buckled, Hatham drove steel through his heart. The body twitched, then stilled. Hatham crouched, breath low. These weren't boys dragged from villages. These were fighters, trained hard, built with the same methods that had scarred him. The marshal wasn't just stealing children. He was forging them into Jeegers that could rival the first generation. He pushed on, ears tuned, to the fortress. Beyond the hall, voices carried down the corridor. Two guards posted near a door, speaking low. Hatham crept close, every muscle coiled. "Marshal says the old bastard begged for days," one muttered. "Swore the formula was too dangerous. Said it would burn us alive." "Didn't stop him, did it?" the other replied. "Stripped him down, left him hanging till his tongue wagged. Marshal took every word, then slit him from ear to ear." A pause, then a dry laugh. "So much for the great commander, creator of the Jeegers, ended like a hog in the slaughterhouse." The words hit harder than steel. Hatham closed his eyes a moment. Whatever else the commander had been, tyrant, torturer, father of their curse, he hadn't deserved to feed this madness. The marshal had bled him dry, taken what he needed, and snuffed him out. Hatham stepped from the shadows before the guards could blink. His blade punched clean through the first man's throat. The second managed to shout, but Hatham's knife silenced him before the alarm could spread. He pushed through the guarded door. The air inside was heavier, reeking of iron and smoke. Racks of potions lined the walls, green vials glowing faint, in the dark. Training dummies, shattered and hacked apart, filled the chamber. This was no barracks. This was the Crucible, the place where recruits were tested until they broke or endured. And at the far end, a heavy iron gate. Beyond it, faint whimpers. Children. Hatham gritted his teeth. He could feel Kale's presence, weak but alive. The boy was here, but so was something else. Steps echoed from deeper within the chamber, deliberate, unhurried. Not the skitter of recruits or the clatter of tired guards. This was the tread of a man certain of his ground. Hatham faded back into the shadows, body taut, waiting. The gate creaked open. A group of recruits marched the children out, chains rattling. The little ones moved with heads bowed, too afraid to cry. Kale stumbled among them, thinner, bruised, but alive. And at their head walked the Shade Marshal. His mask gleamed faintly in the torchlight, featureless but for the slits of his eyes, bright and cold. He gestured once, and the recruits dragged the children toward the inner halls. Hatham's hand closed on his blade. This was the moment. But then the marshal paused. His masked head turned slightly, as if he could feel the weight of eyes upon him. The chamber went silent. Hatham didn't move, didn't breathe. The marshal waited, scanning the dark, then let out a low, almost amused sound, a chuckle muffled by steel. He raised a hand, and the recruits hurried the children out, slamming the inner gate behind them. Then he stood alone in the chamber, the torchlight throwing his shadow long across the walls. Hatham's pulse hammered. He had come for Kale, but the boy was being carried deeper into the fortress. And now, between him and that boy, stood the man who had twisted everything, the Shade Marshal himself. The moment had come. The chamber was still. Only the torches hissed. The marshal's head turned, eyes burning through the mask. His voice cut the silence like a blade. Hatham. The name struck harder than steel. No one spoke it. No one should have known it. Hatham froze, blade half raised. "Who are you?" he demanded. Jeeger? The marshal's hand lifted to the mask. Metal scraped as he pulled it free. Valen's face glared back, older, scarred deep across cheek and throat. The wound was ragged, half-healed, a mark Haytham himself had given years ago. I should have died that night, Valen said, voice raw from the ruined flesh. You cut me down with the others, but luck favored me. My blood burned, my body held, and I crawled out of that grave you left me in. His mouth curled into a snarl. You were too weak to finish the job. Shock gave way to grim clarity. Of all the ghosts from his past, this was the worst to stand breathing before him. Their blades clashed in an instant. Sparks sprayed across stone, steel shrieking with each strike. Valen fought like a beast unchained, scars twisting with every swing. He was stronger, faster, the potion searing through his veins. Every blow forced Haytham back, rattling his bones, but he held. Block by block, step by step, he endured. Steel rang again and again until at last, Haytham found his moment. Valen, overreached, fury blinding him, and Haytham drove his blade clean through his chest. Valen staggered, coughing blood. Yet he smiled, crimson running over his teeth. I wanted the throne, he rasped. I would have torn it from that coward. King's hands. And now, you've stopped me. You've saved him again. His voice cracked into a bitter laugh. Still his loyal dog. The light dimmed in his eyes. His body sagged, then fell, steel clattering against the stone. Haytham stood over him, chest heaving, the weight of every year pressing down. But there was no time for mourning, no time for ghosts. He cut the locks from the cages, one by one. The children spilled free, wide-eyed, shivering, alive. And at the center, Kale. The boy rushed to him, filthy and bruised but breathing. Haytham knelt, steady hands lifting him up. It's over, he said, though his voice was low and hollow. You're safe now. Together they left the fortress, the flames of its torches dwindling behind them. For the first time since the fall, Haytham carried something other than shadows.